Hello guys, welcome back to another video. This video is part of the Kaspa Christmas giveaway series where we'll be giving away Kaspa coin in each video. So this is about educating more people about Kaspa coin and also giving back to you guys. So the way that it works, there'll be 12 word seed phrase hidden in each video somewhere, and you'll have to find each word and input it into a wallet. Then you can unlock the wallet and do whatever you want with the Kaspa coin. Each wallet was made through kaspawallet.io and will be linked in the description. Each wallet is also password protected, but that will also be in the description as well. Make sure you like this video for more of this content and comment down below if you found the seed phrase and got into the wallet. So today we're going to be talking about Kaspa pruning. So there's been a lot of talks around Kaspa pruning in the past and why it might be a good thing, why it might be a bad thing. There are some disadvantages or advantages to this. So we're going to be going through them today and talking about them. So it says here, pruning is a method employed in Kaspa to reduce the size of the block tag. So all chains have a size in gigabytes probably that it takes up storage if you're running a node. This prevents the nodes from having to keep a registry of large amounts of block tag data. So because Kaspa is already at 1 blocks per second, that requires a lot of memory to store all those data. And I believe it's up to, if we look at Bitcoin here, we can see it's up to 587 gigabytes for the whole chain. And I believe that Kaspa coin is already up to 500 gigabytes for the whole chain if you wanted to download the whole thing, like an archival node or a full node. This is because it has so much transaction data or so much block data that needs to be on the network that they've implemented this pruning method to actually reduce that. Because as hardware increases or as time goes on, hardware requirements will increase in terms of the memory. It's not like we don't have terabytes of data which we can use, it just requires more money. And that threshold to actually run your own node becomes higher. So you want to keep it as cheap as possible to decentralize a network in cryptocurrency. So due to the pruning mechanism, Kaspa node only needs 3 days of prior history to be stored by each centralized machine. So once 3 days has passed, it will then get rid of the data, and therefore it's pruned that data so that the next 3 days can be open to transactions. Obviously it's happening in real time, so as one enters the 42 hours, it gets taken off, and then a new one must pop up within the next second. So therefore you always have a snapshot kind of 3 days of data, and hopefully it should all point back to each other. So what they're saying with this pruning method is there's no need to actually have all of that data if it is validated by the last 3 days, because you can always look at the last 3 days and at some point they would all point back to the Genesis block, hopefully. This allows for many nodes to be created for our network with no large storage requirements. The pruning mechanism that Kaspa employs is unique to the block tag and ghost tag consensus method. The goal was to design a pruning algorithm that was resistant to pruning attacks by a 49% attacker. Their design approach employs the apparatus of finality and invalidation rules. So you can see these two here. I'm not going to go through them because it won't really make sense if you're not fully into Kaspa coin or into cryptocurrency. But we have a post here from one of the Kaspa developers. So in the new KIP, the problem to solve is Kaspa nodes are pruned, whereby all block data except the last 3 days is discarded. By applying a clever technique called NIPO proof of work, we can discard all sufficiently old block data and most block headers without compromising the security and integrity of the chain. So one of the main things that people talk about when they're talking about the pruning method is they feel that older mining of Kaspa coin could have been hidden and basically locked away because nobody can actually point back to that data, because all the nodes that are running now would be these ones that would prune off all the data, so you don't actually have the data going back. However, there are archival nodes which might be also running that have all that data for the Kaspa network. In particular, the UTXO set is always present, valid, and can be authenticated. This is enough for most purposes since the UTXO set contains the following data: a list of non-empty balances and their addresses, for each such balance, the time it was created, and for each such balance, whether it was mined or paid, This is whether or not the UTXO is an output of a Coinbase transaction, so obviously if it's mined or paid. However, for some applications, the UTXO set is not enough, and it requires to prove that a transaction was published. In some cases, we even want something stronger to prove that a transaction was accepted. That is, not only that it was posted, but it wasn't shadowed by a conflicting transaction in a parallel block. In non-pruned chains, so Bitcoin, this is not a problem since all nodes verify the entire ledger. So this is why you see this block size here being so massive, is because all of them have to, if you're running a full Bitcoin node, you have to actually verify the whole ledger before you can start verifying the next blocks that come up. As I said, since all nodes verify the ledger and is thus guaranteed to be available, in pruned chains this is no longer the case. A straightforward to this would be an archival node that stores the entire ledger, so something that does have all of that data, and I believe that you can run one if you want to on Kaspa Coin. The problem is that the cost of running an archival node grow with time, adoption, and blocks per second, making them a centralized service. Moreover, the nodes would have to provide the user with some efficient way to authenticate the data they provided against pruned nodes. So there's no financial incentive to run an archival node because it just takes up a lot of space. As I said, the Kaspa network, if you wanted to run an archival one, would be at something like 500 gigabytes. If you run a normal one, I think it's only 20 gigabytes. But the one problem that's going to come in is if you get up to 10 blocks per second, that's basically 10 times the throughput, 10 times the data on the actual chain. If you get up to 100 blocks per second, that's 100 times the data. So to run an archival node at that rate, you would need basically 100 times the hardware or memory cost. And this is why they're saying it could become a centralized service, because you have so much memory needs that as the chain gets bigger and bigger and bigger, that memory need is going to get higher and higher and higher, and only certain people will be able to actually buy that amount of memory and store all of that. So they say a better solution is to use some kind of cryptographic proof data that can be computed before the transaction is pruned and could be used to prove the transaction was published / accepted indefinitely. So it does go through a bunch of things that could be added to improve this. Remember, these are actually probably added by now just because this post is old, but it does say here that there might be financial incentive, or at least incentive to have archival nodes in the future. When we're talking about it here, it says note that this functionality would also arguably make running pruning nodes profitable. Users that failed to generate a receipt before the transaction was pruned could pay an archive holder for generating a transaction retroactively. I stress that the block data is only required for generating the transaction and not validating it. So if it could not generate a receipt, then it could go to an archival node and say, I need the receipt for this, and then it could put it back into the chain on that pruning node. So there has been lots of talks about it on Reddit and in comment sections of videos. Personally, I don't see it as a problem, but there are some people out there that do see it as a big problem. It says here, as long as you have a running full node, the balances will never be lost. All nodes store the balances. What they discard is the transaction history. So you can see that on older Kaspa wallets. If you go onto Kaspa Explorer, you can see that all the transaction history isn't there, but the balance is there, so it must have got there from something. And this is kind of what brought up the whole pruning conversation back in the day, was that people were looking at older wallets and they were seeing that there was no transaction history, yet there was Kaspa Coin in there. So in simple terms, when a wallet is old enough, you only need to know how much money it holds. You don't care how it got there. The only reason you need the full data is to handle the reorgs. The Kaspa protocol is carefully designed such that you assume there are no reorg depths more than 48 hours. So that's 2 days. And then it will get rid of it at 72 hours just to protect or safeguard that 48-hour window. Goes on to say, then it is impossible to create a valid block that requires 72 hours old block data to validate. There is also a lot more blocks on the network happening, as opposed to a Bitcoin or even Ethereum. As I said, there are some comments against this, saying this is horrifying. If early mined Kaspa was consolidated and waiting to be cashed out and no one could check the transaction history for fraud. That's not necessarily a stupid point. but I don't think is valid just because everything on the chain can point back at some point. It's obviously been running for about 3 years now. There's been videos on YouTube channels for at least 2.5 years, and we've basically seen nothing really bad happening. There was obviously times where Kaspa coin was mined by somebody to upkeep the network and the security, so there must have been some people mining it at the start. If that was the developers, so be it. They might have put it into a development fund, and that's what they're using to develop currently right now. But if you were an outsider looking in and you didn't do so much research, you might think that that is an easy way to get around the fair launch of a cryptocurrency. Obviously, we have cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin that have had mining going on. It's just the wallet wasn't touched by Satoshi. So therefore it is fair launched in that regard, because most of the financial incentive to mine the coin isn't there because it was all locked away into one wallet. So let me know your thoughts on the pruning of Kaspa coin, and if you have any qualms or anything or any questions, I can answer them in the comments below. Make sure you like the video and subscribe for more content like this.